my gosh, do you look beautiful.
When I first started thinking about this story, Felix was the central character in my head, and I've always been reluctant to work with Bill after Lost in Translation because I feel people loved him so much in that, and it's too much expectation. I could never do that again.
But I think you can just have more energy and quicker within the lines.
But now after all these years, I feel like I love working with him. We'll just go for it and try something, and it'll be something different.
Stand up. Put your arms around me.
What? Yuck.
I have great trust in her. I've been really fortunate to work with people that are really good and fun. So when they call, I just go like, okay, it's Sophia.
I feel like now that I've known Bill all these years, he's a friend and like a big brother who, not unlike the character, kind of sweeps in and brings magic and life to the situation. So he's sort of this fairy godfather.
Does my foot smell funny? I'm having more fun watching her all the time. I mean, she's just a child when she made this movie, and she just keeps getting better.
Just wait a little longer before you exit.
Oh, sure.
This movie is personal to me in that it reflects where I've been living and details of parenthood and struggling with being creative and trying to find your footing. And in Lost in Translation, it was a young woman in her 20s kind of finding herself, and now this is another phase. And hopefully by the end, the characters have gotten something from each other.
We all just want to be loved. You've got beauty and character, which is the most important thing a person can have.
Welcome, everyone. It's so exciting to be here today for Behind the Scenes, directors, showrunners, and producers. It's so much fun to be here as part of TheWrap's Women's Summit in our digital year and online. And I want to welcome this extraordinary panel. First of all, I'm Kathy Schulman. I'm a longtime film and newer television producer, and I'm so honored to be here today with such an extraordinary group of television creators and showrunners. So I'm just going to go around quickly and introduce everybody to you today. We have Liz Tigler here with us, who's the showrunner and executive producer of the 5-time Emmy-nominated Hulu limited series Little Fires Everywhere. The wonderful Tanya Sriracho, most recently served as creator, showrunner, and executive producer of the critically acclaimed series Vida on Starz. Ilana Pena is the creator, co-showrunner, and executive producer of Diary of a Future President. Smriti Mudra is the creator and executive producer of Diary of Indian Matchmaking on Netflix. Elle Johnson most recently served as co-showrunner on Netflix limited series Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker, starring and produced by Octavia Spencer. Leslie Headland served as writer, director, and showrunner for Netflix's acclaimed series Russian Doll. And David Collins is the Emmy Award-winning creator and executive producer of Queer Eye. What an amazing group of panelists that we have here today. So welcome. I want to let everybody know as we start today that one of the amazing things that binds this group together is the deep commitment to diverse storytelling, stories by and about marginalized groups in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and ability, stories that elevate diverse lives and unpack historical and present-day bias. All very fitting, of course, for the summit's 2020 focus, Inclusion 360. Today, what we want to do is have a lively discussion that digs deep into the challenges and joys of this kind of storytelling, beyond the usual discussions about how these stories came into being, and more about what is this moment in television really like, and how does it work? Panelists, you're encouraged, please, to engage in open conversation. Certainly don't wait for me to ask you some question, although I'll reroute the conversation here and there to try to cover 6 or so subjects. So just to start us off, here we are on the heels of Me Too, following George Floyd, propelled by BLM and in the midst of a social revolution. And it's as if Hollywood studios, networks, and financiers suddenly woke up from a deep sleep all at the same time and decided to give walking the walk a try. Finally, in an instant, creators are being asked to do it all, commit to omnicultural storytelling, hire diverse staff. Everybody make a difference. So you're in this every day. What's it like? Who'd like to start? I'm going to pick on Tanya. Go ahead, Tanya. I know you're a professional panelist, so I'm going with you first. I've heard you many, many times out there, so you're on.
Well, I recommend Tanya too.
We all do. You're it.
I'm a little like, I'm a little cautious of this moment because as we're living it, first of all, race and ethnicity, it's like stuck in the binary in this country and also in this industry. So right now, I'm hearing, speaking for brown people, I'm hearing a talk, but not the walk yet. I feel there's like a fear of like, I think we're supposed to be doing something, and there's a lot of talk and there's maybe stuff being developed, but like, I think I'm still watching to see if it's really going to cause change. I know people are acting buyers and stuff like from a place of maybe fear, or like, I think we're supposed to be doing it this way. There's like, I think that this is the correction that we're supposed to be taking part of. And sometimes it's not very organic, it feels cosmetic. So I hope that in a year we'll be talking and be like, oh yeah, that stuff really landed. And, there's an understanding of what was happening. And then it's manifesting itself into like narratives and stories. But right now I'm still like watchful and like paying attention to see if it's really going to shift. I know there's a lot of talk and people, like you said, like, but it's, I'm still like a little.
Well, I'll dive in just to say you used a word that we use a lot, omnicultural, right? And kind of omnicultural storytelling in the environment that we've always been in, at least at Scout, is being kind of hyper aware. 20 years ago, with Queer Eye, when the word queer was like, and everyone was running in the opposite direction. We've really kind of tried to stay ahead of that, obviously, focusing on storytelling of marginalized communities in all different types of ways. But Tanya, I'll tell you, we're really seeing it from the buyers right now, and particularly the streamers. We have shows across all the streamers right now, and I'll tell you, it is a lot. It's a heavy moment because there's so many things that need to happen, and you can't fix them all magically. Systemic racism is just that. It's systemic. It's in the core of the fabric. So how are we going to do that? And that's really the challenge, I think, that's in front of all of us right now. As a company, though, we are challenging ourselves with the buyers to figure out ways of figure out, do you have someone shadow someone that's never had the experience? Are you double paying salaries? All of these things that allow us to at least walk the walk, to use your example.
Yeah, so you're saying two things, which is interesting that, first of all, like Tanya, you're saying, is this even real? Is it going to last? Is this a moment? Is it going to get, shoved under the rug again, like it normally does, like all woke things normally do? And that what you're saying, David, is so interesting too, is it's not so easy, right? Not so easy to just turn on the switch and make the difference. Can some of the rest of you elaborate on all of this?
I have a little bit of a complicated feeling about the idea of being marginalized. I would rather, think of all of us, who are on this panel as money that the industry has left on the table because of their own blindness, and opportunities that have been slept on that people are now waking up to. I think for my career, my whole purpose, of everything that I do is to prove that my perspective and the perspective of other people who have been ignored for a long time is not niche. Our stories are global, our perspectives are, relatable. And, I think, with my show, Indian Matchmaking, I think it's almost like proof of that. I started pitching that show in 2009 and was consistently told it's too niche, it's too niche, it's too niche. Maybe if we have a matchmaker come and matchmake American couples, which of course was at that time code for white, maybe it could work then, but it's too niche. And, now when the show came out and clearly, it's sort of people around the world have been able to relate to it. So, I think talking about us and our stories and our communities as marginalized, is still, I think, from the perspective of the sort of powers, that have been for up till this point. But I'd rather think about us as, the people that, sort of all the opportunities that they missed, that now we can take advantage of.
The erasure of some of our stories, though, is real. There's not a single Latinx themed show on broadcast television, right? There isn't. Like, that's erasure, cultural erasure. So, like, we are. Yeah, I don't like thinking of otherizing ourselves that way, but like our stories have been sort of kept out of the mainstream, and that starts to also they're helmed by not us, and they become kind of like a cultural Monsanto that you consume somebody's version of you, and then it's like it's really damaging and toxic. We're like, oh, so I'm that, and also this this industry in this country or in that country in the United States, it imports culture. So like, and I know I'm so sorry, myopic. I'm so myopic about Latinidad. I'm sorry, but like that's what But it like.
Sorry for that. That's what you should be doing.
But it, that's what we're exporting to Asia, to Africa. That's who we are, and it's such a limited version of like not just our identities, otherized identities too. But like it's like there is like I hope this call to action to it really does work, because like, and I know that people need guidance. Ilana and I belong to a group that helped release this letter to Hollywood that and it a lot of people of the dominant culture have been like, oh, thank you, there's a guidance, like we can follow. Okay, so we just do this, and then and you know what, if that's what it takes to sort of make that overcorrection, then fine. But it's hilarious how people need guidance, or like they used to reach out, because my show was staffed. All the writers were Latinx. All the directors were Latina. Like it was, I just did that, and people would contact me. It was like, do you have a writer for that? How do you do that? You're just like, you just do it. You just do it. Like I have no writer for it, but like, can I see your writer? Like for what percentage of staffing do you have to? You just think anyway. But I think people need that writer, the guides, and I guess it's fine to like, for this moment.
Well, Smriti, you were saying, but wait a minute, it's an ignored marketplace, right? Like, so I understand what you're saying, Tanya, and I understand what you were saying too, which is, and both are right. So systemic change experts will say that systemic change only happens when three things happen at the same time, which is that perceptions of a biased marketplace are changed. Pipeline is addressed, so new creators can create and new people can be employed, and culture is changing simultaneously. And culture usually means that the powers that be, or whoever can choose and finance, changes. So let's talk about that for a minute. Where are we? Is the marketplace changing? Is the pipeline changing? Is the culture changing? What are we dealing with here? Because everything you're saying is true, right? Why were we marginalized? Why are we marginalized? We exist, so there should be a marketplace. Where's the breakdown between pipeline, culture, and marketplace?
Well, it does feel like we're in a period where things are changing, where the dominant culture is more interested in stories beyond itself. Even as we're kind of experiencing with streaming this niche marketing of stories, it's interesting on Self-Made, I really felt like as much as Madam C.J. Walker's story was known within the African-American community, I really wanted it to go beyond that for people who were not part of Black America, to find out who she was and to understand that she was part of a bigger story of titans of industry, and that there were things that were specific to the Black community that would be fascinating to the other communities, so that, the specificity of our stories can kind of inform the universal human experience. But I feel like we're in a period now where people are interested in finding out about other cultures. Like when Indian matchmaking came on, I was so excited. I watched that entire thing in a weekend, and I had no intention of doing that. I just wanted to watch the trailer, and then I was just sucked into it.
And it's addictive. It hooked me.
My God. And then I started to look up all the people. I mean, it just becomes a thing. But I really feel like part of, as much as it's great for us to be telling our stories and we want to be seen and represented, another part of that is I want this to be something that white men will watch. Like, I want white men to see our stories. We should not just be inspiring our own people, but little white boys need to be inspired by Madam CJ Walker. They need to know who she is, and we have to get beyond just thinking we're telling our stories for ourselves. We're telling our stories for everybody. These are human stories. And I'm just hoping we're in a period where it's baby steps, but where people are starting to appreciate that, and white showrunners and people who have only been hiring one of anything in their rooms, or looking on a very limited list, will start to feel like I can and should hire more than one, and I want a breadth of experiences.
Yeah, I feel like I live in this like utopian world because there's kids on my show, and I feel like I am so grateful for the world that we are showing them. Because like, and not to like toot my own whatever, but like I'll like run around giving everybody orders, and then I watch the 13-year-old lead of my show watch me. And like the other day she had a thought. She was like, what if we were both on the bed? And she like directed that moment. And I was like, you're doing it. Like and she's seeing it. And there's nothing that's telling her she can't, because I'm doing it. And most of our directors are women or Latina women or Black women. And it's like, we're showing not just, the kids, the Latino kids on our show, but the little white boys at home who are watching and who like can see, not just the subject matter that like, this is a girl who grows up to be president, but the people behind the scenes who are making it, and the people like I'm doing this right now. And the person who's covering set was a showrunner's assistant last season. She's now a staff writer. She's also Cuban from Miami. And I've just like watched her shine and grow, and she's going to have her own show in 5 minutes. And like, I knew I could give her that because other people gave me that. And so I'm just like, and I see the kids watch it, and it's not just what they're doing on screen, but it's what they're seeing and who's telling them. Like it's just so I'm creating the world I want to see like on screen and behind the scenes. And I think kids, and maybe again, I'm in this like bubble of joy, but they are seeing it. And I do think that like, when I was 12 years old, if you had told me like, you're going to create a show and be a showrunner, I would have been like, absolutely. Like, I'm ready. And then there was like a point when I was like 22 and I was like, not me, like little old me. And then I had to like get back to that. And I think that empowering kids and having that be not just, to see it literally, but to also just like feel it viscerally of like, this is something that I can do, and I can feel empowered to tell my stories. And a lot of the kids on my show are like, I'm writing now, and like, I want to direct. And I'm just like, that's so special and important. And I don't want them to get to that phase where they decide that they can't do it. I want them to and I think that the more we make content and they see themselves on screen, or they see people on this panel, or they see stuff like that, they'll like keep doing it. And like they'll be running their own shows in 5 minutes and be on their own panels. So it's very,
You said something so beautiful that I think is relevant to all of us, which is you're telling your story in front of the camera, and it's just as important that you're telling the story that you want to see behind the camera. And what a beautiful way of stating that. I have twin 11-year-old daughters. Oh. And, the gay guy here on the panel, the gay daddy here, my whole thing has been with them to grow up in a space that's like, I don't care who you love. I don't care. Like, this is life. Let's just do it. It's you or you. And they get to see this, just like you're saying, through the eyes of all these new perspectives and new opportunities that I know I definitely didn't have as a little scared gay boy in Cincinnati, Ohio in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know?
How we tell our stories is as important as the stories we're telling. I think
Yes.
that's the moment. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Kathy, I think there's like a very simple, from my perspective, a very simple answer to the sort of three-prong, scenario that you laid out, and it's change the gatekeepers. It's change the gatekeepers. Ilana was able to give those opportunities to people behind her because she understands, that those people are capable and she can trust them. And I think that's what's been holding us back for so long. I pitched my show to white man after white man after white man, and everyone was like, it's too niche. I don't know who's going to get it, until I met Bela Bajaria at Netflix and she bought it in the room. Literally the easiest pitch I've ever done. So I think you change the gatekeepers, you change everything.
Yeah, that's really smart. So you ran into an Indian gatekeeper, and look at how the world changed. And that is so interesting what you're saying. And Ilana, you were saying that, essentially when the marketplace opened to allow your show to be made, you were able to encourage the pipeline, which is happening all around you all the day. And I think you're exactly right that it is about these three things, and I think that as creators and as influencers, in the business, it is our chore to continue pointing out that reaction, because every single part of it has to keep working. And for us to have, sustainable change, you're right. Like, you have to have that change with the gatekeepers. You have to have that awareness of the marketplace, and you have to keep pushing people through the system, right? Which is, I guess, what we're all engaged in. One of the things that, can happen in a situation like this is that an awful lot of responsibility can also fall on you as a showrunner. For example, kind of in the category of, all right, so we're spotlighting, increased representation. But then the Twitter mob says, but what about me? So for example, like, let's take, Crazy Rich Asians. Okay. Instantly a phenomenon, right? We're talking about a movie right now, but instantly a phenomenon. Oh my God, it's possible to make, as if this should be so confusing. Imagine there could be a successful movie with Asian people in it. What a shocker. And initially, like, huge amount of excitement about that. And then a complete flip-flop. How is it possible that you only made a movie about rich Asians? That's not the way the Asian diaspora is, right? What about all of us? What about all the people you left out? So I'm curious to discuss for a minute what kind of responsibility storytellers really have to be inclusive, we're working in fictional narrative storytelling, right? So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to be responsible for changing the whole world? Are we supposed to take one segment? How do we deal with this? Why don't we start with speaking a little bit about shows that, are featuring women? Leslie, do you want to talk to this, issue, a little bit about, do we have to take care of all women if we decide to talk about women? And then we'll see if we can go from there.
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. I think I can speak on it for sure as a female creator, but also as a queer creator, because, I certainly started it out in independent film and writing very unlikable female characters in the early 2010s when, that kind of wasn't in vogue. I went around, as Simitri was saying, I definitely butchered your name, I apologize, but okay. I had such a similar experience where everyone said, oh yeah, this is great. You're very talented. This is exactly how women talk. No women will pay to watch this. And that didn't make sense to me. I was like, but if you're saying that women would respond to this, and if this is authentic, you're telling me that the way that you package women within this industry is something you don't want to sell back to them authenticity. Like, you're just interested in a particular version of them. And it really was the gatekeepers, like the Judd Apatows and the Amy Schumers and the Kristen Wiggs, who really kind of kicked the door open and said, this isn't, or Whitney Cummings, like everybody around that time period that was like a female stand-up or a female comedy creator was going like, actually, that's not true. Like, we don't need to necessarily filter the female experience through the male gaze in order to create content that would be consumed by consumers. I think you see this a lot in the queer community, especially with lesbians, because you see You see a lot of queer coding with female characters in, or queer baiting with female characters in shows, especially geared toward young people, you know, shows like Riverdale and stuff like that. It's like, we can't have a queer storyline, but we absolutely can play sexy music while they stare into each other's eyes. Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, I'm kind of like, well, why don't we just make the characters gay? Like, I don't understand. Like, why don't we just like have a gay storyline? And I think there's both a fear, because most, like you guys have already pointed out, a lot of the gatekeepers just don't have our experience, so they don't want to say that, but and they don't want to speak for it. But I think they also go like, isn't this just kind of cleaner? Like, isn't it just kind of cleaner to show a woman that doesn't talk about blowjobs and doing cocaine? Isn't that just like a little bit better than going out on a limb and saying, like, you know, maybe, you know, teenagers have gay experiences and are experiencing, you know, different things with their sexuality and now even gender identity, which is beautiful, like seeing that experience. The idea that we're still kind of sanitizing that for especially younger audiences is very disturbing to me. You know, like, the last thing I'll say is when you see, you know, especially in, cartoons or Disney films, or like I said, young adult audiences, the idea that characters can't be gay because being gay means sexuality or sex, whereas, like, you know, straight people, it's love. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is a real, that's something that's still, it's still going on. And the reason I feel it so deeply is that, you know, I didn't come out until I was 33. I come from a family that's incredibly religious, and I am still having that conversation with them. And let me tell you, the number one thing that got my mom to understand what was going on in my life was Grace and Frankie. Like, truly having pop cultural touchstones to say, Mom, you know what I mean? Like, this is what's going on is incredibly important. You know, they're not going to read queer theory or feminist theory. Like, the more we can have a pop cultural reference, the more we can have open-mindedness among our consumers and our audiences, I think.
Yeah, I feel we have a gay storyline on Diary with like our teenage character, and there is something so special. Like, we shot a scene the other day, and some of our like guys in makeup and some like people were like crying because it was something that, and I watch it, like, I'm like, okay, are we doing the scene right? And then people are like, I look over, the line producer is like sobbing because like people didn't necessarily have that growing up. And then again, I'm like, but this kid, this, you know, 16-year-old kid who's just reading these lines, like, this is normal for him, and we should just normalize this. And it's on Disney Plus, and I just like, I feel so lucky. Yes, we're trying to be able to do that. And it's not like it's like a closed set. We're going to talk about gayness now. It's like, it's the same way we talk about the straight couples on our show. And it's just, I feel very lucky that I'm able to kind of like concoct this like magical world I want to see, so that the little Leslies can hopefully see it and feel less alone.
I feel like I would have had I feel like I would have had a completely different life if I watched the show.
So nice. But you have a pretty good life.
I just want to speak directly to the sort of backlash, you know, aspect of it, because, you know, frankly, for as successful as Indian matchmaking was, I did get a lot of backlash for the show from a lot of people in the South Asian diaspora, because it was, you know, a very narrow perspective and a very narrow slice of the diaspora that was represented and the culture. I just, you know, and I completely understand where that frustration comes from. I completely understand when you've been so starved as a community and as a culture of content that reflects you and represents you, when something comes out and bubbles up to that level, it's painful to not see yourself in it, you know, and I completely understand that. But I do think, you know, that it shouldn't be up to one show. We should have 100 shows that represent all of our different, you know, backgrounds and cultures. And I mean, even just South Asians, I mean, we're 1.5 billion people, 26 languages, 6 countries, 12 religions. You know, there's no way one show can represent all of that. So I think, again, this comes down to gatekeepers. You know, we had, you know, I would hope that, you know, at least in my little corner of the world, like Indian matchmaking, you know, kicked the door open, and many more, you know, shows will flood through. As with all of the creators on this panel, all of the shows that we've created, you know, have proven that there's a market and there's a need for this kind of content. So hopefully now this will just proliferate so that all the different facets of our experiences and backgrounds and cultures can be represented the same way it's been in white culture and dominant culture for generations. So I think we're at the brink of that, and I'm optimistic about, the future of that. But yeah, I think some of the reaction and the backlash, like for Crazy Rich Asians or for some of the other shows, is that when you only have one, it's like it hurts to be like you're not in that one.
I want to support the notion that you're saying about the gatekeepers. I would not be here if the executive that bought Vida if she wasn't Marta Fernandez. That's the formula, because there's some championing that goes on that has little to do with like what we see, like that goes on in that castle that you're not privy to. That when you have those gatekeepers that have like skin in the game, it changes everything. Then you don't get a babysitter to get, as you're a baby showrunner, like that kind of stuff happens, So I think that is key. And that's the part I do feel like it's missing from a lot of places, those like positions of power at those places. But when it works.
Do all of you, do you think that as creators and showrunners that you can kind of reverse influence the gatekeepers? I mean, it's a really interesting situation, right? Like you're the artists, yet they're the the content choosers and the content financiers. How can we as an artistic group affect change to those very people that can choose to make more content that's progressive?
I have to shout out Tanya in this moment, because I was so inspired. I read about your amazing deal that you made and the lab, that you're creating as part of your deal. And I feel like that is the key, that's the answer to your question, Kathy. And I can't let this panel end without shouting you out, Tanya, and saying how inspiring that is. And definitely like,
you see Peace putting like big white man money behind it, and that's walking the walk. Like that's crazy. I mean, that's because like that's the key too, like convincing those like people in the tower to be like that we're worth it, so that anyway.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, that we it's I remember, when Catherine Bigelow won her Academy Award, and it was as if there had been this big check mark and the entire industry said, there you go, a woman won an Academy Award, we're done. And it was like, now it's like, we did it. So you can't say that we don't do that anymore. See, a woman won an Academy Award and then that was enough. Like that basically checked the box, and then we'll never have to do this again because we can always say that we supported one woman. It is really true that, it's very easy to fall into this patterning. Oh, well, now we do have one Indian show or one Asian show, or now we do have one Latina, whatever show. And that's it. Like, check the box. See, we all did it, and I think and everything we can do to expand beyond one single vision would take some of the pressure off of, oh, my show has to solve all problems at the same time, and just switching gears a little bit, and for Liz and for Elle, I wanted to ask you, in these situations where, as I understand it, you were able to create behind the scenes hiring, which was, more inclusive, but in the sense of, more women of color, and you'll talk a little bit about what you've been able to do. It's funny, in some ways people say, oh, well, there's a necessary overcorrection. Like, why don't we create an entire writing room of, LGBTQ plus people, or why don't we have an entire crew of women? I just want to sort of talk to what's it like to try to do that, and does it make the experience any better or worse, or is it irrelevant?
I mean,
you want to start, Elle?
You go, Liz, you go.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, for us, part of telling the Madam CJ story, the book had been out there for so long, and I think 20 plus years, and trying to get made. And I think we really felt that it was important that we find, women of color who wanted to tell the story, who so often you don't get to tell your own stories. And so we felt like it was really important to give people like ourselves the opportunity to be part of telling that story. Also, just because the road to getting it made was so arduous and difficult, you really needed people who were dedicated and passionate about getting that story told, who would hang in there for the long haul that it took to, finally get it on air. So that was kind of essential. You wanted people who were really just personally dedicated to it. Having, and we were fortunate in finding Kira Kelly was our DP, and Demaine Davis was our director of was our producing director, and we had fantastic women of color who wanted to tell the story. Having said that, we often referred to it, people were like, oh, it's so great you have this sisterhood. And yes, it was great to have the sisterhood, but also part and parcel of sisterhood is arguments and disagreements. Like, you argue and fight like sisters as well. So that's not to say that it's just going to be smooth sailing the entire time. But I think the difference was that we all felt really dedicated to treating each other better, to not falling prey to kind of the behaviors that we may have seen in other jobs that we had, where you get dismissed or you're not heard. As difficult as it is when you have, strong personalities, to try to cater to all of them and hear everything, we felt it was really important to set a different standard and really allow everyone to be their full, selves, but also to hear them and to be able to take what was going to work for all of us from that. So there was struggle within it, but, the sisters, yes, but sisters fight and argue just like anybody else.
Privilege.
I love that. With Little Fires, I think, I don't know, I feel like I have 8,000 things I could say on this subject, so I'll try to narrow it down. But, Little Fires, first and foremost, was a show about motherhood. And I think we approached that show coming into it from the perspective of mothers first. So we talked a lot about staffing a room of mothers, having a work environment that worked for mothers, having heads of departments who were mothers. And so that created an interesting, it just created an amazing dynamic on set. And then, of course, on top of that, we also, knowing the subject matter of the book, that we were telling the story of these 4 mothers, 2 mothers of color, 2 white mothers, that I knew in the room we wanted to have upper level voices that could speak to those experiences, not to say that there couldn't be a staff writer who could come in, but that it needed to be kind of co-EP level, room runner level voices, people who felt like they could all be in a position to kind of lead the room with me. And so we ended up having a very upper level staff, but it was an incredibly diverse staff. And it's funny, it was all women. And then actually ABC Signature was like, don't you want to hire one man? And we were like, I was like, doesn't that ruin the picture? One man, it's just poison everything. But then I was just like, yeah, I get it. It's not about being inclusive, isn't about being exclusive too. It's not like we can't hire a man because it's going to ruin this idea that it's this whole group of women. But we hired our lone man who was perfect, a man who thrives in a room of all women. And it just ended up being this incredible experience. And kind of, Elle, to what you're saying too, I felt this feeling on set that I had never felt before, which was this really maternal feeling where it just felt like all the moms had each other constantly. And I don't mean to say that everyone was a mom, but everyone had a relationship to motherhood and daughterhood in some way. So it's just as women, I feel like we were all we got you, go take care of that. Or there was no feeling ever that you tend to have of my kid's sick, what am I going to do? It's your kid's sick. Well, luckily there's 800 mothers here to be we got you. What do you need? It felt like this amazing experience. And then to the other part of the question about is there ever too much inclusivity? No. I mean, one of the things that I really learned on this show, and this probably is obvious, so it's also kind of embarrassing to admit this, but I staffed that room in a particular way, and I knew going into it, yes, race was a humongous element of the room, but using the word diversity, it was I wanted people in all ways who, we ended up in that room having people who were adopted, people who were in foster care, people who had immigrant parents, people who were raised by single mothers, obviously lots of mothers, some single mothers, so, people with in interracial marriages, people from Ohio where the show took place. I mean, there was a lot.
Now that's diverse, hiring people from Ohio.
Yeah.
Baker Heights and Columbus. I mean, that's diversity. But
Right.
yeah, and what was so incredible is like, I'll just use the example of the Black women on the show. Like, I'm not meaning to speak for them, but just because they're not here, I will say what they kind of concluded, which was they were like, it's such a relief not to sit here and have to be the lone, like Ramla Muhammad was like, I'm so glad that I'm not alone responsible for the reaction of Black Twitter. You know what I mean? She's like, oh, I feel like I can take it off my plate. Like I'm not carrying the weight of Black Twitter on my shoulders to what we do. And what was so wonderful about the conversations was, for four Black women in the room, including our writer's assistant, they each had such unique, different perspectives. Sometimes, obviously, they were arguing with each other the most, and it was like nobody had to be responsible for telling me a story. They needed to be responsible for sharing their stories. And through the sharing of their stories and our stories, we were able to infuse, Mia with her story and feel like we had the collective life experience to speak to that. So anyway, my last point is that I went into that room feeling like, oh, I want to staff this room in a certain way because of the subject matter of this book. And that's what's going to be the most helpful to all of us being the collective voice to tell this story. What I realized in leaving the room was, it doesn't matter what the subject matter of the show is. It doesn't matter that the book happened to be a, exploration into motherhood and race and class. I could be writing a show about anything. And still, even if I was writing a show about all white women exactly like me, it would still be of humongous benefit to staff a room that is inclusive in all ways. So I think, that's such an obvious statement, but I can't say that I didn't necessarily go in thinking about that in particular. I didn't know what I wasn't thinking about, but I came out thinking something different,
It's amazing, and just that, what happened, it seems like is, and this is a huge, conversation that the industry needs to understand, is you went in thinking about diversity and you came out understanding inclusion. And people are very confused about what the difference is. And the two terms are being tossed around as if they're identical. And, diversity is about counting people of different types, that it's essentially, it's mathematical in a way, right? It's like, let's make sure there's somebody that's representative of this or that or this or that. Inclusion is that all voices are equal. And when working together, the result is better. And
what you were saying, Liz, though, just about how the Black women on the show have different experiences. And I think that's speaking to an earlier question that you had, Kathy, about, including the breadth of all of our stories. We're all different and we're all going to bring different stories to it. And just acknowledging that there are so many more stories to tell within each of our communities, that it's a deep bench. We don't just have one story to tell. We can keep going back, and there's so many more that we can be telling, which is great.
Absolutely. And I will say one thing that speaks to what we were talking about earlier too, and I think this is what Tanya was saying about change coming from an organic place. And this also goes to the question of like, what do we as showrunners, creators, what is the pressure that we experience? I feel like right now we are being tasked with a lot in a great way, but, I think in terms of building our rooms, in terms of hiring our directors, in terms of everyone down from department heads to who are the PAs that we're bringing in, like who are the people we're bringing up. And we are, some people have been looking at this for a really long time. Some people have been, had a wake up call more recently, but I don't know. One thing I noticed with Little Fires, it's like, you get this room, you have all this perspective. I'll just give like a tangible example, but like we had I would say 4 people in the room say that they had experienced in high school or college the feeling of going to a counselor and a counselor telling them that they didn't need to, in some ways, reach so far, whether it was college admissions, whether it was an AP course, whatever, that like they were kind of good where they were and they didn't need to reach so far. So that was something that we wanted to fold into Little Fires. P.S. It was also in Michelle Obama's book.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm doing the Michelle Obama television show right now, right? First Ladies. And that was the core. She says that's the core to her feeling of lack of worth, was that, you know, her guidance counselor said, Princeton, aren't you reaching too high?
Exactly. So you write that story, you send it up the chain, and the feedback we got was like, what's up with the guidance counselor? Like, kind of what, almost like, why this harsh take on the guidance counselor? Do you know what I mean? And I mean, what was interesting about it was it was like you ask people to hire a room, you ask people to share their true, you know, their truth and their true experiences, their vulnerabilities, the things that have caused them pain. You write it into a script, and then you have a bunch of people who have no relation to this experience giving you notes, whether it's white men or white women. And that's the thing that's hard too. It's like, we can do all this work on shows, voices that normally don't get to tell their stories, get to tell their stories. But yes, to the gatekeepers, it's like, there has to be change on this whole other systemic level for those stories to go up the chain and not be questioned. And I mean, what was great was Attica Locke, one of the writers on our show, was like, I'd like to write a quick letter, explain it. And I was like, go for it. Yes. And we were able to say, like, you hired us to tell an authentic story. You can't question the authenticity if you have not had this experience. So,
you know, that's an interesting segue to something I wanted to get to, you know, that maybe we can try to hit in the last 15 minutes of our, you know, panel today. You were talking about authenticity, Liz, and we have another thing going on to add to our sort of our list of ingredients of things that we're dealing with as creators and showrunners. How about the fact that now we're dealing with platforms whose algorithms assess demographic trends and audiences? And, you know, most of us, well, some of us, I should say, are old enough to to have laughed at the notion that content could be governed by algorithms, which when that was first introduced by streamers, we just thought that was the funniest idea ever. How could you ever decide what content to make based on analyzing the users, so to speak? They became not audiences anymore. They became users or consumers. Well, now the joke's on us, right? Algorithms are kind of ruling the day. Be more earnest, be less earnest. Teenage boys like content that has romance. Teenage boys don't like content that has romance. You know, this, that, whatever, you know, and I'm just curious, while juggling the pressures of trying to do authentic, woke content creation, what about the algorithms out there, and how is that affecting what you do, and how are you being guided? Is this a helpful thing, not a helpful thing? What's it like dealing with all of this marketplace research?
I just recently saw a list of things a streamer is not buying from, you know, a list made up from the things that came back from the algorithms. It was so offensive, but that means the audiences are being hella offensive too. Like about like, no, like it was like different types of Latinidad. Don't want to see any of that. But this one's fine, but not this one. Like it was like that kind of thing. Themes that are like sub themes and Latino, like it was like so.
Give an example, like what kind of a sub theme or a theme?
Because I wasn't supposed to look at this list, but okay, I was supposed to look at this list, but it's like, but just think like, let's say, no Mexican stories that have to do with gentrification and queers. Like I'm just saying, be that,
yes,
you know.
Yes.
But you can do Cuban YA stuff, like bring us that. So like that, like the list is that specific. And then it gets even more, because like the more, when you call out ethnicities, it's, but that's how they're listening to pitches, you know? So I don't understand. I don't know what it means, but I know that that's sourced from the viewers. So what does that say about them? I don't know. But I did see that and I was like, I don't understand this industry. I'm just going to go, this is.
But is that them interpreting data? Because I know, with a lot of the streamers, just because I'm watching a show doesn't mean that I'm getting shown or pitched the shows that someone else is watching. Like there's still human interaction with those algorithms. And I wonder how much it's being manipulated, because it's just too depressing to think that they're really shutting off those kinds of stories. It's ridiculous.
But if they're like, no Mexican queers, like if they're like, no one's watching the Mexican queers. Okay, don't listen to Mexican queer pitches,
But Tanya, it's kind of what you were saying before of like, for so long, the people telling those stories have not been actually the people with those lived experiences. So maybe the reason they're not watching so-and-so Mexican show is because it's a bad show and it's not, and it's helmed by a not Mexican person. And no, I'm not talking about your show, Tanya. I'm talking about the white people trying to tell our stories or trying to tell the others' stories, and it's not because they don't like this particular whatever. It's because that story it's not the best way that we could be delivering that content. And so that is also I feel, I don't know. I also don't really understand it, but I feel like to put it in a box of people don't a lot of people told me when I was pitching Diary to age her up. That was a huge thing I got because I pitched her as a 12-year-old and they were like, people want to see young girls are pure and older girls are can be sexy. This middle ground, this tween is we don't know what to do with that. And I was like, okay, well, that's exactly the reason why I want to have her this age, because I never saw that. But it's now people are watching that. We have it now. So hopefully the data is positive towards that. I just think you need ubiquity. You need volume of this content so that we're not this one show that explores this one background. People aren't watching it, so we can't have anything else like that. That's not, and we have people telling their own stories.
Don't you get those lists where it said they're buying this type of thing and this type of thing? Don't you get that? And that is pulled from somewhere. I mean, I don't get, but you get they're not looking at the Tiki or they're what the that guy, and you're like,
shows about women. They're not really looking at shows about women. There's women.
This conversation is very, because it's made me realize this is all about evolution, isn't it? It's all about trying to move us forward. I was just saying 20 years ago when I sold Queer Eye, they bought it not because it had anything. It was queer was a cool word. Oh my God, that's fun. That's crazy. The gatekeeper's let's take a chance. And then it worked. And they're oh, all right. And then they realized, oh, well, wait, it's not really about being gay. It's just about actually sharing stories and connecting with each other and a little transformation with love and laughter and connection. And then fast forward 20 years later to the one on Netflix where it's oh, wow, it's really not about that. It's really about us all connecting and growing further. Our storytelling on Legendary, for example, on HBO Max, African American trans community. I didn't have my little typey thing here, but the he, his, him, using pronouns properly. Those are little things that I've been growing with. And the algorithm over there saying people think it's cool now. They want to know more. So they've been searching for it. And that's why that show's doing well, because I think it's a new world to peek behind the curtain and be oh, I didn't know that exists. I didn't know that's how that world's being celebrated in a cool new way. Tanya, I was going to tell you, though, I had a show that I just took out about two beautiful, gorgeous brown ladies who have an amazing business. And I got, it's too niche.
Just now. That happened even now, huh?
Oh, right now. Oh, yeah. Just took it out.
I think the algorithm, I think it cuts both ways. It's definitely alarming when at the peak of the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor protest, the number one trending content was The Help, that's a little scary peek into what the algorithm reveals. But also would the algorithm have told us that people would love a show, about four, 20, 30 somethings in New York City and it's a show about nothing? Would the algorithm predicted that? I think the algorithm, like everything else, has to be one tool, in a series of things that we use to sort of decide what's going to get greenlit and what's going to get made. Changing the gatekeepers is really important because you have different gatekeepers. They're going to take chances on different creators and different stories. The algorithm can be informative and hopefully reinforce like what is working, but I don't think we should be like beholden, to an algorithm because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, and as creators and creative people, you really can't. Like, you've got to go where the heat of the story is, where your interest lies, where your passion is, because this is just too hard to do if you're not into the stories you're telling. So
it's hard to do regardless.
Yeah, right. It's hard to make bad TV also. It's all hard. So you may as well gravitate towards the things that you love and just hope that you can kick the door down with that.
Exactly.
I completely agree with Elle. It's like our job is like to do what we love and tell those stories. And, I kind of leave the rest of it to what David's saying, the evolution of the distribution of it. And I used to joke back in the day, when I made my first film, there was this big splash about how it was going to be coming out on iTunes and VOD before it came to a theatrical release. I mean, this was only 8 years ago. Everyone was like, oh my goodness, what does that mean? And blah, blah. But at the time, I kind of thought, and I know this is a little cheeky to say, so I apologize, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you ever want to know where the evolution of the entertainment business is going, just distribution-wise, just look at the porn industry and the sex work industry. Like, as soon as porn became democratized and algorithm-based, like, I just thought, like, when they were pitching VOD and streaming to me, I was like, yeah, that's the next thing. Like, that's the next thing that's going to happen.
I think we all have to make an OnlyFans now.
Exactly. So OnlyFans, this is where I'm going. This is where I'm going. It's cheeky, but this is where I'm going. With OnlyFans, I got very excited because I started to think maybe there won't be any gatekeepers. Perhaps it will just become that we are creating our own content based on our own experiences, hiring the own people we want, and we are pushing through those things as opposed to, like you said, having to go back and get notes from people that don't understand that stuff. And maybe there will be a bit of a revolution, just in the same way that the early 90s with the independent film distribution. As soon as distribution starts to become, video based, streaming based, OnlyFans, like your own personally owned platforms, like these are things that could be really exciting for quote marginalized communities or artists. So it's exciting. I mean, listen, I'm still scared to death of it, and I agree with Elle. I just have to put my head down and do my work. But when I saw that starting to happen, I was like, this could be fun for us.
I mean, look at what's coming out. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Leslie, just for audiences out there who might not know what OnlyFans is, can you just explain?
Please, someone else explain what it is. No, I'm not going to explain what
it is.
Should I? Okay, I brought it up, so I'll take a stab at it. It's a content, social media, I guess, hybrid content platform where people pay for access, to a specific creator and their content. So, if I had an OnlyFans, I mean, right now, like, Leslie was saying, it's definitely like the sort of torchbearers, of OnlyFans are people in the sex industry and, things like that, sex workers, and, lots of other types of people now. But, you pay something if you want to see what I create and what I put out there. And it's like a very direct, eliminating the middleman, a very direct transaction between audience, and creator. So
thank you.
I hope I did a good.
I appreciate that because I wanted people to understand that what you really have been saying, as we sort of close up the panel today, is that, the authenticity of the storytelling that you're doing is what creates the new marketplace and the increased awareness. And the remaining barrier is still the cultural decision makers, the gatekeepers, right? That's what you've basically said today. And what we're trying to struggle with as artists is, here we are, that we are the content, yet there's still a friction between what is being chosen and what it is we can already see is working for the marketplace. And even in a more grandiose way, changing the world, right? And making it a better place so that increased storytelling can make people better understand one another and communicate with one another. And so I just think that's a very interesting place that you've come today. So here we are in a revolution, but still caught, between, well, what a surprise, the marketplace, commerce, and art, which is where we've all lived.
Art and commerce. But I think you said something earlier, which is the three things that all have to happen at once. I truly believe we're in a zeitgeist moment right now. It is whirling really, really fast. And all of us here, I love what you said, the passion. If we bring our passion to the table and we keep pushing that into the zeitgeist, that's what people get a hold of. They feel your passion. They connect to it. They see themselves. They want to share it with their kids and say, look, the world is a bigger place. We're all different. And that's for me the exciting part right now, is that this zeitgeist is all the folks here opportunity to truly share each of our stories in this omnicultural place, right? It's amazing. I'm blessed for us all.
Well, I can't imagine a better way to end this panel than with what David just said, because he just wrapped it all up perfectly. And that is what it's about. And it's been such an amazing gift today to share this time with you and to be able to share with our audience, your incredible creative minds and the enormous wave of change that you collectively are making for the world of content and the possibilities of what people can watch. So I just want to thank you on behalf of TheWrap and all of us at this year's summit. Thank you so much for participating today, and keep making those great shows.
Thank you, everyone.